How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and today I've got the pros and cons of living in Fort Collins, Colorado, and we're covering them starting right now. Alright, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett, and listen, if you're interested in learning all the ins and outs, pros and cons to moving to or around Denver, Colorado, then this is a channel for you. So that subscribe button and notification icon you see on your screen, make sure you click on that as I'm dropping new videos for you each and every week. And as much as I try to be a little educational here on camera, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and team of some of the state's most talented realtors. And we are helping people move here each and every day. So that number and email you see on your screen, know that I am always the person, answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails, there when and if you need me. Now that we're done with that fun-filled stuff, let's get to what we're here for, and that is the pros and cons of moving to Fort Collins, Colorado. Alright, so if you have checked out Fort Collins at all, you have rapidly seen that there is a lot to like about the town. But at the end of the day, this is a pros and cons video. That means I have to find like random reasons to tell you why it's not good. Maybe you'll think those are a big deal, maybe you won't, but let's jump into the number one pro, and that is the fact that Fort Collins, it's pretty, it's beautiful. I mean, it is a pretty town, especially this year. I've mentioned this in another video. We've gotten so much rain this year that we normally don't get, that in areas of Colorado where you would normally see like that yellowish green, it's just green. And Fort Collins is so filled with trees that it's just beautiful. And then behind it, you have the mountains. You have the Rocky Mountains right there. So just a very picturesque place to live. When you're out on hiking trails or biking or walking around, there's just great visuals everywhere you look. And the second pro, because as you might imagine, I have more pros than I do cons, ties into that visual, and that is Old Town, historic downtown Fort Collins. So Old Town, coincidentally, and again, I have to mention this in every video about Fort Collins now, the downtown of Fort Collins, a gentleman named Hopper Goff went out to California and modeled Disneyland's Main Street after downtown Fort Collins. That's pretty cool. So when you go to Fort Collins, in a sort of way, you're visiting Disneyland without roller coasters or mice or basically anything Disneyland otherwise, but still. But Old Town is just a cool downtown area. And I am, if you've watched any of my videos, I love a good downtown in a small town feeling. Whether, you know, we're closer to Denver and we're talking about places like Arvada or Littleton, Parker, but Fort Collins has one of the coolest, and it's sizable. It's multiple blocks. It's walkable. There's pedestrians everywhere. There's bikes everywhere. There's coffee shops, restaurants, little boutiques, a ton of mom and pop shop. You obviously see some corporations there like any other town, but you get a sense that the community is still very much involved. You hear live music playing in a lot of different venues. It's just got a great feel to it, and their downtown is one of my absolute favorites statewide, if not nationwide. And I can't talk about downtown Fort Collins without mentioning The Social. The Social is a nationally renowned or known speakeasy. I'm a huge speakeasy fan. I was told about The Social on one of my last visits up there. Checked it out. Excellent spot. So if you get up to Fort Collins, remember The Social. Now I gotta give you a negative because I gave you two pros, so I'm gonna give you a negative, and that is the fact that because it's beautiful and because it's got this great downtown and some of the other pros we're gonna cover, that Fort Collins is seeing rapid growth. Its population has increased. We saw this in Denver over the last several years, over the last decade plus. Fort Collins has seen that the last 10 years, and it continues to grow. As people find affordability down near Denver less a positive, they start to move farther north. And also I think that there's a lot of people who are moving up to Fort Collins because in many ways Fort Collins is what Denver used to be. Denver was a city that didn't feel overwhelmed. Fort Collins is a city that, at least to me and a lot of people moving up there, doesn't have that overwhelmed sense either. It seems like traffic's a little bit chiller. The people are, a bit slower, calmer, friendlier, nicer. So that population growth in Fort Collins is definitely something that people are aware of, especially people who have lived in Fort Collins for an extended period of time. Tying onto that, not really able to go back and forth on this one, the second con leading from that is that affordability, cost of living, cost of housing is increasing in Fort Collins. It has been for some time. Now, Fort Collins people there have told me, or they will look at neighboring communities, like they'll go a little south to Loveland. Windsor can actually be more expensive in some areas, but they'll look to outskirts. So you have people moving from not just the Denver metro area, but you have people moving from this area up to Fort Collins for affordability. And then you have situations where people in Fort Collins are moving outside of Fort Collins for that same affordability. So anytime you see population growth, unfortunately, that is going to be one of the counters to that. You're going to see cost of living and specifically cost of housing increase, and you're seeing that in Fort Collins with both buyers and renters. Jumping right back into the pros of Fort Collins, because like I said, I like the town, is some of its amenities, some of the things you can go do. Fort Collins is big for breweries. You're going to hear that quite a bit. It is home to New Belgian Brewery, Odell's, Busch, Prost. There's several breweries up there. I believe there's over 20 in that nearby community. They may not all be in Fort Collins, but they are nearby. Along with that, you've got places like the Mishawaka or the Mish Amphitheater, which is a great riverfront next to the mountains, outdoor theater, couple different stages, great place to see different concerts played, different events held. So the Mish is a very popular place for people to hang out in Fort Collins. And playing off that outdoor recreation, Fort Collins, very big into their outdoors. They talk about having 285 miles of walking, running, biking, hiking trails, 44 miles of them paved. You'll see it everywhere. You'll see people on their bikes everywhere, including downtown. Old Town is very bike friendly and pedestrian friendly, unless you're me and you like to keep stopping your car too far into an intersection. I'll say that every time I make a video about Fort Collins because I do it every time I'm there by accident. But a very big outdoors space. Now, here's where I can sneak in one of my cons, and that is, and I didn't realize this probably because I hadn't driven from Fort Collins to the mountains that many times, but ski slopes are roughly 45 minutes to an hour farther away than if you were coming from Denver, at least for the most part. The closest ski slope from Fort Collins going into the mountains is Eldora. It's about an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on traffic, to get to Eldora. To get to Breckenridge, Vail, Winter Park, you're looking at 2.5 hours plus, could be up to 3 depending on traffic. I mean, I-70 can be a mess, so it could be longer than that, but roughly 2.5 to 3 hours. In comparison, if I'm leaving my house and trying to shoot up to a Winter Park, a Breck, I can be there in under 2 hours, roughly. Again, traffic can play a nuisance there, but call it 45 minutes to an hour longer if you're living in Fort Collins. Playing off of that, again, I'll tie in another con, and that is if you are someone that needs to get to the airport routinely. Most areas of Denver, you can be to the airport in 30 to 45 minutes. If you're coming from Fort Collins and you need to get to Denver International Airport, plan on an hour. Maybe you get there a little quicker, 50 minutes, 55 minutes, but odds are it's going to take you an hour or so to get to the airport, and that can be a big deal for people who obviously have to travel more often. Back to our pros, Fort Collins has a lot going for it in the education side. The Poudre, I keep mispronouncing, I think everybody mispronounces. The Poudre School District in Fort Collins is one of the highest rated in the state. 31 elementary schools, 10 middle schools, 3 high schools, 4 charter schools, all in that school district, and consistently one of the higher rated that you're going to find anywhere in Colorado. Couple with that with the fact that Fort Collins is home to Colorado State University, one of Colorado's one of 2 of its largest universities next to CU or Colorado University, University of Colorado, whatever. But Colorado State University, founded in 1870, a massive school. Originally for big on agriculture, still is, but huge for veterinarians, a lot of different programs. I'll always say it, a big equestrian presence there. That is something I did not know in my more recent visits to Fort Collins. When I visited the campus, flew my drone around, is when I realized just how much of an equestrian presence is there. They got the horses out. when I was a little kid, I called horses doodaloos. So they had a bunch of doodaloos out there. Now you know a fun fact about me that's just random. Playing off of that pro, Colorado State University is also home to Canvas Stadium, which was opened in 2017, seats about 41,000 people. Obviously they have their football games there, but they also have some concerts, they'll have movie nights, they'll have different events throughout the year at that stadium. Pretty cool space. And it just adds to the campus. Colorado State has a very, very cool campus. It's great to walk around. Obviously, a lot of history to it. It's 150 years old plus at this point. So a lot to it and a massive part of that community. Now, the con to that, and I think this kind of goes for any town or city that has a large university in it, and that is that it has a college town vibe. Now, this is one of the things that kind of cracks me up, is that I'd hear, and I'd have people tell me, well, you know, Colorado State is kind of known as a party school. I'll be honest with you folks, I don't know what that means. I don't know any universities, I don't know any colleges that are not party schools. I don't know, I mean, obviously there's a handful of 19, 20, and 21-year-olds who aren't into getting out and about and partying, but we're 20 years old. That's just kind of what people do at that time of their life, at least a good amount of them. So to say that Colorado State is a party school, I just figure it's kids. And if you have tens of thousands of kids going to a school, plan on that impacting your living situation. Same thing, exact thing basically goes for Boulder with the University of Colorado. Say during the fall and winter months, the population booms, there's a lot of new students, they're going to restaurants, they're going to different places, you're gonna see them out and about, having fun, doing their thing. And then in the summer, obviously most of them leave and the town settles out a little bit. A little bonus fact that I wanted to make sure I mentioned about that, and this is specific to renters who are thinking about moving to Fort Collins, is that you really, if you can, want to time your move for late spring, early summer, when a lot of those students are leaving, or at least they're not looking for housing. Whereas if you're getting there at the same time that these students are starting to come back, you're going to be competing for housing, most of them being renters. You're going to be competing for housing with tens of thousands of kids. Going back to my pros because I love it, and that is Horsetooth Reservoir. So Colorado, not known for a lot of water. Horsetooth gives you a pretty good fix if you enjoy water. It's great for boating, it's great for kayaking, paddle boarding, swimming. It's got some great camping sites, got some great trails for hiking. It's got some cool boat docks and some great neighborhoods up in the hills around Horsetooth Reservoir. You'll see people out fishing, water skiing, what have you. A pretty large body of water, again, at least by Colorado and near to Denver standards. But a great place, and something every time I get up to Fort Collins, I'm always drawn to heading over to Horsetooth, even if it's to just sit by the side of that reservoir for a little while and hang out. But a lot to adventure there, really a great space, and it ties into how outdoorsy Fort Collins is. There's so much about getting outside in Fort Collins, whether you're out in nature in the mountains, whether you're at the reservoir, whether you're downtown walking around in the streets of historic downtown. It is a place where you want to get outside. You could in some ways play that as a con as well. I know some people who do not care for Fort Collins because of how outdoorsy it is. Fort Collins, Boulder, I'm not saying Fort Collins and Boulder are the same, but I get a lot of the same feedback from people with Fort Collins as Boulder who are not big outdoorsy people. They talk about how they kind of get annoyed at how much they're asked or how much pressure there is to go on hikes or things like that. So if you're not a big outdoors person, that might be something you want to consider, because a lot of the people that you meet in Fort Collins are going to want to do outdoor stuff. That's just the things they do. My last pro for you today is the strong economy that Fort Collins has. And it does have a very strong, sustained economy built off technology, healthcare, education, finance, some of the bigger companies there. Obviously, you have Colorado State University, one of the biggest. First National Bank has a headquarters up there. Xcel Energy, which provides power through a lot of Colorado, nationwide, but Xcel is very big in Colorado. You have Advanced Energy, you have Hewlett Packard, and you also have the group or some of the bigger employers in the area, but a very strong, sustained economy throughout Fort Collins. And I also mentioned earlier, a lot of their economy is still the mom and pop shop, still the privately owned stores and shops and boutiques and what have you, restaurants, bars. So definitely a hustling and bustling economy, strong enough to sustain the city by itself for the most part. Obviously, you have people who travel for work or work remote, but there's still a lot of opportunity economically in Fort Collins. And because I just have to be a jerk and end on a con, and I would think that none of these cons are really overwhelming you at this point, but a con I hear is that Fort Collins doesn't have a pro sports team, which again, I mean, if you lived in Colorado Springs, which is the second biggest city in Colorado, they don't have a pro sports team either. And it's roughly the same drive from Colorado Springs as it is from Fort Collins to get down to Denver if you want to see a pro game. So, I mean, obviously in Denver, we've got pro football, we got pro basketball, we got pro hockey, and the Colorado Rockies are the best minor league team ever to be allowed to play Major League Baseball. I have to make that joke every time I talk about the Rockies. So if not having pro sports in Fort Collins is a deal breaker for you, I mean, you're just going to be very picky about the cities you live in, because I don't know, maybe only 30, 40 cities nationwide have pro teams. Either way, there's a lot to like, only a few things to dislike about Fort Collins, and I'm willing to chat with you about all of those things. So the number and email you see on your screen, know that I am always the person. Answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails, there when and if you need me. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. That was the pros and cons of Fort Collins, Colorado. Until I see you next time, peace.